Good morning. Greetings from the Institute of Global Professional IGP Bangladesh. Greetings from the Institute Honorable Knowledge Seeker. Today I am your host for the morning. My name is Bathun Das. I am from Bangladesh, Dilan Knowledge Seeker. I am proud to be associated with IGP as a global member. IGP is a social and ISO certified international training institute. In 3 years, we already served 3 million plus knowledge seekers from 100 plus countries. IGP is internationally recognized and globally accredited. We are connected to more than 250 plus profession and 4,500 plus organizations. Institute of Global Professional is a training faculty for skill development which was founded in 2020 and is a competitive generation to meet demand in the global labor market by providing professional qualifications. The Institute of Global Professional is an educational institute that provides social work globally recognized and reputable, serves students and community research, providing holistic social work and education. We believe that it's not effective to increase one skill just by acquiring formal education. So we provide effective training and consultation to generate proficient generation all over the world. We distribute our services locally and nationally, internationally to student job seeker, job holder, and also for learners to respective campus location and distance learning platform. We are an occupational and dependable institute. IGP is one of the famous online institutes from all over the world. Our vision is education is not a business product, it's the part of our human rights. Based on our vision, we are trying to reach all corners of the world for free webinars, seminar, courses, award, quiz competition, mentoring, and counseling, etc. On the other side, we are also trying to serve more than 100 premium services for free. Create own portfolio website, resume builder, cover letter, motivation letter, and wall knowledge platform for gathering general knowledge, which can update all day. Kids learning games, website free course, converse sites, and many more. We help to empower you to learn to meet their expectation and dream and become highly skilled people. We implement several training program, webinar, and offline online courses for youth and learner by professional trainer, speaker, and coaches. Our sessions are conducted by globally renowned professionals to develop all kinds of youth and to promote the education of their abilities and personalities. To ensure Excellent and in-depth instruction we arrange with qualified trainer, speaker, and instructor fee. Standard free service to more than 3 million knowledge seekers in last 3 years. We have affiliation with universities and organizations in 70 different countries. Virtual signing with many colleges and organizations have been accomplished. We are working to create a legendary generation of future scholars who will be accountable. We are constantly prepared to assist all knowledge seekers with valuable service. Spreading knowledge is crucial for the Institute of Global Professionals. We believe that knowledge is love and light ambition. So we try to understand the needs of today's generation and will serve them with good research and practice methods. We must have a genuine concern for the learner we represent. More diversity, growth, and innovation are required to lead a session with professionalism, passion, and integrity. IGP members are committed to effective best quality service and continual improvement so that individuals who seek information can improve their skill level and value. Before we move to the next, let me remind don't forget to share, tag, and mention your friend in the comment box. Your support is very valuable for us. Thank you. Before we move to the next, let me remind you don't forget to share, tag, and mention your friend in the comment box. Your support is very valuable for us. Thank you. Moving to the next with your continuous subject already completed 1269 webinars successfully. Wow. Moving to the next with your continuous subject already completed 1269 webinars successfully. Wow. At present we are going to start our 1270 program name is Mental Health Care for the Youth Professional, and today our speaker ma'am name is Shreya Grace B. Pasilua. She is from Philippines. Before I hand over this to our speaker, I want to share a very little bit. She is Ala Young Leader Batch Assembly, Ala Young Leaders Congress 2019, Vice President in Accounting and Finance, Intercontinental Network, INC. Now, very important moment for me to invite her to IGP with her presentation. Very important moment for me to invite our speaker to IGP with her presentation.
Hello,
Hello,
so good
ma'am. Good
day.
morning.
Good morning. So, it's nice to see everyone attending today's IGP session. So, should I start now the presentation? Can I ask if you are
Ma'am, the stage
seeing
is
it
you.
clearly?
You can start your presentation now.
Okay. So, can everybody see the slide clearly? I guess you can see it already, right? Again, good morning and good evening or good afternoon to everyone who's watching the current IGP session. My name again is Cheryl Grace B. Pascual. I'm actually a regular IGP trainer now. For today, we will be discussing more about the mental health care of young professionals. As you can see in the slide presented below, this is actually a resource that I have taken from the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand. You can find their website online, and they would have this presentation there. It's called Developing Work Environments, if I remember it correctly. So I'm well much acquainted with the different perspectives, or you can say the different lenses of the workforce in the 21st century society. In the current 21st century workforce, you can either be an employer, an employee, or an entrepreneur. Especially nowadays, if you have observed that the trend of the workforce is very much versatile in the current years, there's a lot of young professionals that have been doing well with their work. There were still some struggling, but there is a current trend. If you've been always on social media, if you've been seeing a lot of the news, the current pandemic was a little bit of a setback at the first few months of the 2020. However, progressing towards the pandemic, it opened a lot of different opportunities, different doors for the youth, and even on the other generations as well, to develop their wealth, to develop their mental health care, probably even develop their own self routines and the like. So, given this health trends that I would like to call, I want to focus more on how we provide mental health care for ourselves, especially as young professionals. Personally, I am an employee for or under the Department of Education here in the Philippines. I was also an employer once because as a freelancer before, and at the same time, I was able to, how should I say this, purchase the services of some of different people online during, especially during the pandemic, to help me with my work. So in a sense, I could have been in during the 2020 to 2021 global transition from pandemic to the coming new normal. I was an employer once. Then, as an entrepreneur, I'm currently also working aside with some of my um, local industries here in our city, and some of my friends are also entrepreneurs. So I have been observing um the past years on what these current trends in society have effect, or how they affected these individuals, from employees to employers, then to the entrepreneurs. So today we will be seeing through the lens with the 21st century workforce. So if you can see in the screen, there these are the objectives that we will be looking into for today. So first, we would need to understand mental health and well-being. Then we need to also understand why it's important to think about well-being at work. So again, with the current trends, the usual hype or the hustle that we're talking about, if you can observe it on Instagram, I think, and in Twitter, there's a lot of hype and hustles and the side hustles topics. There's a lot of people on TikTok and other social media platforms that are, how should I say this? They share a little bit of how they were able to garner that much wealth, that much success at a young age. So there's also a lot of people in the older generations who would share their little life tips, their career tips to the different generations, whether it's a younger generation or their same generation that's been struggling with their careers. So there are almost little to none when it comes to focusing on developing well-being at work. Most of them were just rants about how the work has become toxic for them, but there's really rare TikToks or Facebook Reels or whatever social media content that you can find that's focusing on how to develop well-being at work, and rather avoiding the different upcoming cultures such as quiet quitting, if I remember it correctly. There's been this trend like that. So we will be discussing and looking into some of those trends and how it affects the current generation, and how we can counter it by understanding mental health and well-being at work. Then we also need to learn how to create a positive professional and personal environment. So in this case, I focus on the professional and personal environment to promote better mental health as a professional, because um, as an individual, you're comprised of two different aspects of yourself. As a professional, that's the side of you that's focused more on your work and career, and the personal development, which is more focused on yourself as an individual. So we will be looking also into some practical things that you can do both as a professional and an individual into developing your overall mental health. Because whether we try to focus on your well-being at work, if your well-being at home does not match on the same wavelength as your well-being at work, it's still going to be affected. So we need to tackle a little bit of the other, your well-being as an individual, in order to support your well-being or mental health as a professional. Okay, so now let's focus on what first is mental health and well-being. So according to the WHO, World Health Organization, last 2014, they defined it as a state of well-being where people can reach their potential. Let's underline the word potential. cope with normal stressors, can work productively, and contribute to community. So a lot of people think that well-being is just being the best version of yourself, especially whether it's at work or at home. But I think it's more on being that certain state of yourself wherein you're open to being past your comfort zone and being able to find different opportunities or even develop your own roads to those opportunities and developing more on your potential. So this is I think this is very rare nowadays because a lot of people would just either focus on their current work or the different or rather the different fields that are connected with the industry they are currently working. There's also a lot of young professionals nowadays that have been, especially here in Asia. I think it comes with the culture of over expectations and overwork, especially in the Asian community, wherein a lot of the young professionals either make do with the bare minimum when it comes to the effort of the work they're currently in, and sometimes there's even this, as I've said, hypes and different trends in the workplace, um, wherein they focus more on what they call working working within your salary. That's what they define it. It's basically working only in the different tasks that you are assigned with regarding your work. It's not about doing the extra mile. It's about doing only what is in the bare mile that you have to walk in. So I think it's different from being in a state of well-being because um, the hype is also very, for me, competitiveness and hype is also very good for your health. However, too much of that is already what we could call detrimental. However, let's focus first on the aspects of work. So there's a lot of aspects of work that can harm or impair mental well-being. So some of these are, of course, psychosocial risks, but of course, it may also be more helpful to refer to psychosocial risks as risks to mental well-being. So if you've been in a workplace, especially for those who are young professionals who are, let's say, taking their first step into the work community, or in the workforce society, there's a lot of young professionals who will be shocked. They will be under this certain work culture shock. That's what I call it usually when I ask or even talk to some of my peers and some of the people, younger generations, or let's just say my different friends who are at a younger age. A lot of them would have or experience this work culture shock wherein they will be somewhat surprised. I wouldn't say traumatized, but they were just simply surprised by the huge difference between being a student or being an unemployed person to being an employed one. So most of the time, a lot of people take that course. They start with being a student, then they go to being employed under a company before they either continue or be promoted at a higher position or become entrepreneurs, wherein they would get to manage their own time, they would quit their 9 to 5 jobs and the like. However, no matter the course you take, there's always problems that can risk your mental well-being. And I would state a lot of examples in the upcoming slides because I would share to you the different perspectives that I have garnered or I have let's say accumulated during the years of me talking with a lot of the local entrepreneurs that we had and a lot of the different people who have been both in the private and the public industries that I have talked with and are quitting their jobs because of different risks to their mental well-being. So, how do you actually define poor mental well-being? So, here are just four of the different characteristics or signs that the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand has provided. So, the first is that it is costly to both individuals and organizations. Of course, having a workforce that is poor or functioning poorly is not good for a certain organization. For an individual, of course, your mental well-being, as I've said, is very important. A lot of the different things that you can do within the day, during the day, or even after the day relies on your mental well-being after you wake up. From the time you wake up to the end of your day, a lot would rely on your mental well-being. For example, a person who's having problems with, let's say, depression or anxiety would often have insomnia. When you have insomnia, you would lack the sleep required for your body to function properly. So there are some people who have insomnia or sleep deprivation. They would either be really pale, they would have no energy at work. No matter how much they eat, they would have no energy. Of course, their body is tired, their mind is tired. And especially in the case of those who are suffering from anxieties, because of course the mind is constantly worrying about a lot of things. They're thinking a lot of about of things. They're not having the proper mental rest that they need. So for those people, especially those people who's having mental health problems, it's difficult for them to function properly. For those who are just having, let's say, a huge amount of stress accumulated, whether it's from work or it's from home, it's similar or it's nearly the same as those having those mental health problems. They would also not be able to function with their individual tasks. For example, they would not be able to wake up on the right time. It's either they're going to be too early or too late. For those who have let's say problems at home, they tend to oversleep. There's a lot of people who use sleep as a coping mechanism. They would sleep, and then when they overslept, of course they would be late with work. They would not be able to have breakfast. They would have a lot of poor time management problems that would come their way, and they would not be able to perform their tasks because of it. So it's consequence after consequence. This also happens, of course, if this problem is already happening in the individual scale, in the circle of the individual, wherein his personal life is being a mess because of his or her poor mental well-being. Of course, it's going to affect the other circles around him. So if, for example, the individual is having anxiety or is not just mentally well overall, it would affect the peer groups first. Of course, the people who are closest to you, your family, your peer groups, your friends. And from this, of course, it's going to larger scale. You're not going to be able to do your job properly or do your work properly at home. You will not be able to do your usual tasks, your routines. It's going to affect the routine of the other people. Because, of course, as they've said, no man is an island. We're all interconnected. We're just like a huge archipelago. So, with that, it's going to go round and round in circular spiral motion until it's going to affect the overall organization. That's why is ever since the pandemic, the 2020 up to now, if you've seen, there's a lot of trends that are rather or institutions and organizations who are starting trends and advocacies focusing on mental well-being, especially at work. It's a little bit sad actually that we actually need a pandemic to instigate or to become the catapult that would empower us to focus more on the mental well-being of our workforce, because if it wasn't for the pandemic, we would not have the time to be at home and observe how being a working mother, a working person is hard to juggle with your tasks at home, because especially if you're someone who's still in a work from home basis as up to this date, it's going to be hard because of course you would need to fulfill the tasks both with your work or career at the same time with your house. So it's overall very bad, as if let's say for the example, of course a car, as I've said, for costly to both individuals and organizations, it's the same with a car. Having a poor engine, having a, let's say, loose nuts inside the car is going to affect the overall health of the car, the overall performance. It's the same goes with the individual and the organization. And of course, poor mental well-being is acute or chronic. So there's a lot of people who are actually suffering from chronic mental poor well-being, poor mental well-being. Um, Maybe it's because of the again the toxicity of different work groups. There's also a lot of toxic and negative factors that affect in the social aspect, psychosocial aspect, and we would dive into a lot of these factors in the upcoming slides. However, it's very alarming if you have chronic poor mental well-being, and at the same time, when this happens, I would highly recommend that you consult a professional. We have a lot of professionals that can help you narrow down what's happening in your body and in your mind. For example, I had a friend who's actually he's from Canada, and he's been calling me at 3 a.m. It's actually in the afternoon for them. It's morning here in the Philippines. And I've been constantly woken by his calls because he is having problems, he said, with his mental well being. And I would often ask him in specific questions of what he's feeling, what is, or what does he think are the factors affecting those things, and what are his coping mechanisms. He shared to me before that he thinks that he is not being happy enough with what he is doing. In fact, he's already having a double degree at the university. He's performing well with his classes. And his family is actually very supportive. So I asked him, why do you think you're unhappy? And he would tell me vague answers like saying, I don't know. He doesn't he doesn't feel like all of the factors in his social life would contribute to happiness because he's satisfied with the overall um quality of his life. However, for some reason he still feels unhappy. So I told him maybe it's in your ambitions, maybe it's in your dreams that you're not being fulfilled with. Maybe you don't find contentment with the hobbies or the tasks you're doing, the routines you have. Maybe you are not taking the time to go walk in nature or do the things that you love in general. He said he's been doing it. So the last resort that I asked him is, have you gone to the doctor? Because if it's not something you think that's a factor that's affecting your well-being, it's probably something in the physical. So I asked him for a checkup, and guess what? When he came back, the doctor recommended that uh, mm, he take medicine because his body is not how should I say this? His body is not developing or functioning well in the sense that it's not processing dopamine or the happy hormones properly. In short, he's not, no matter how much food he eats that has dopamine, has the happy hormones, that has the hormones, or let's say the compounds that can help him feel happiness, it's not working because his body is, there's something wrong with his body. So that's the general prescription, that's the general findings of the medical field. And I told him, then that's the answer to your problem. Try to first listen to the doctor and then tell him what you're feeling after. So gradually in the few months that came after, he actually developed, he was able to progressively improve his mood, his well-being, and now he's taking a lot of the different tips to develop it more into a better lifestyle. So from that, you can say that the chronic mental well-being he has is something that's stemmed from the physical. So if you're feeling in long periods of time, if you're feeling unhappy, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling depressed, and it's not just a one time symptom, then that means you're having poor mental well being, and it's something that you need to consult either with a psychiatrist or with a doctor to narrow down what's happening with your body. And also, always let us also be reminded, by the way, not to use medical terms in mental health wellness and mental health, like for example depression, as a common term, because there's a lot I've observed in the younger generations. I'm part of the younger generation, but I've observed a lot of my peers, they often, especially here in the Philippines, if you've been here in the Philippines, we've been using a lot of the term depressed. Like depression is actually a mental, or rather a health finding. It's a health, an illness, health problem. So I find it alarming that a lot of people would use a hyperbole. I call it a hyperbole. It's an exaggerated term to define a certain feeling. If you're feeling down, you can just say, I feel sad, I feel unhappy, I feel alarmed, I feel anxious, I feel quite a bit, um, yeah, I feel quite a bit under the clouds, something like that. Use different expressions, because depression, if you say I am depressed, that means you need to be medically found to be suffering from depression. That's the key term there. Depression is actually an illness. So, as much as possible, let us teach ourselves and others to refrain from using those terms. So, whenever I hear someone say, I feel depressed, I'm depressed, or I'm suffering from depression, I would correct them. You can just say, I feel somewhat depressed. I'm not sure if I'm feeling just a feeling a bit of sad, because depression is feeling unhappy, feeling sad, feeling incontent. There's a lot of mix of emotions there. It's actually a very high term for constant unhappiness in a certain period of time, a long period of time. So you need to be medically found first before you can say that you are depressed. Next is, of course, the result from a single or repeated exposure to risk factors. This can happen anywhere, anytime, whether at home or at work. For example, you are a new employee at a certain company. You've been suffering from bullying from your peers. Um, it could result to poor mental well-being, because as seen here, or as defined here, where mental well-being is actually a result of a single or repeated, underline repeated, exposure to risk factors. In the case of the example, the risk factor is your peers, bullying from your peers, and repeated exposure to bullying, of course, would result to um, anxiety, and of course other different emotions, different mental problems that can come along with um, yeah, poor mental well-being. And next, of course, is the impact can be mild to severe psychological disorders like depression or anxiety. So if you have constant poor mental well-being, especially from those risk factors, of course you would develop mild to severe psychological disorders. So it would happen depending on your trauma, depending on what you're suffering from. If you've been suffering for long periods of time, repeatedly, let's say thrice a day, 5 times a day, that's going to take a huge effect on your mental well-being. Compare it to those who are suffering it from, let's say, once a month. That's a lot milder compared to those suffering it daily. So we need always be alert. We always need to be mindful of the different symptoms that can contribute to poor mental well-being, as well as the factors, so that we will know how to narrow everything down, how to minimize everything, how to control everything to improve our overall well-being. Okay, so here are the factors that affect mental and health. Yeah, mental health and mental well-being. So there's the factors: culture, social relationships, economic and political systems, physical health, historical context, environment, and spiritual well-being. So let's tap into a little bit of all of these factors. So let's focus first on spiritual well-being. So there's a lot of people who had resorted to different spiritual coping mechanisms to cure their well-being overall. For example, there are some people who constantly or have let's say a routine, a set routine to visit their church or other religious institutions, religious organizations, religious buildings, and some of them even use different spiritual items to cure, or let's just say have their no, activate their faith. Yes, they use different tools to activate their faith to cure their well-being, or overall improve their well-being. For example, in our case, a lot of the Catholics here in the Philippines would go to the church every Sunday, every seventh day of the week, in order to conduct, or rather attend mass, wherein they would use prayer to heal their emotions, to release all the stress accumulated during the week. I have a friend, on the other hand, who's Muslim. he's been praying a lot every day. You know, they have this the five prayers a day like that. So during the time, he would tell me that he would really have this solemn prayer spot in his house. I forgot the term for that, but he said he would have this spot there specifically where he would always pray whenever he's suffering from he's been being affected by external factors, you know, people, his school, his workplace, because he's actually a working student. So he always goes to that specific spot. There's a different spot for other prayers, but there's that specific spot where he usually prays when it comes to problems that would affect his well-being that is contributed by external factors. So I guess that's his way of coping with his poor mental well-being because of the risk factors as mentioned. There's also a lot of people who have a specific item wherein they cling to whenever they are having problems. For example, for me, I have a specific item which is actually a rosary because I'm Catholic. I have a rosary wherein I would use it whenever I'm having problems with my work, with myself, or overall I'm feeling really down. For example, I'm feeling hopeless because maybe I had problems with my boss, with my colleagues, or maybe with my friends. Maybe I'm having an examination and I couldn't control my anxieties, or overall I have poor mental well-being for the day. I would often hold that rosary and use it to activate my faith. Not I'm not praying on the rosary. I'm just praying through it, reaching my inner self to God, to, let's say, just overall ask for help to calm down myself, to give me a clear perspective on how to view what I am encountering. So those are spiritual well-being. There are a lot of people who recommend spiritual being well-being to cure or to somewhat, let's say, help with improving your mental well-being. But in some cases there are some cultures, or maybe some cases wherein spirituality is the reason why they are stressed, because for example they are having peer pressure from their family or from their friends to convert to a certain religion. That would fall under spiritual well-being as being a risk factor to your mental health. Next is we have environment. For example, environment would be a lot of different it would come in different contexts actually, because environment could be environment as in natural disasters or what's happening within your environment, versus environment that would go with social environment, your environment as for example your room. So these factors could also contribute. For example, you have a messy room. It was found that a lot of those who have messy rooms are actually less, not actually less productive, but have somewhat higher rates for anxieties and depression. Because, of course, sometimes it would be a lot gloomy if your room is gloomy, low dimmed. So, of course, sometimes your emotions would match the tone of your room. But in some cases, in rare cases, there are some people who actually feel much more calm in a dimly lighted room. So it would vary depending on the person. However, in this case, maybe the risk factors here are pertaining to natural disasters, because natural disasters can cause very poor well-being, especially for those in developing countries. For example, in the Philippines, there's an instance wherein, or no, actually recently there's an instance wherein our locality, our region suffered from a magnitude 6 earthquake. People on that certain area was very much in a poor mental well-being. They're really down, they're really anxious because they were waiting for continued, what you call this, earthquake aftershocks. So they are very anxious waiting for those aftershocks because they never know whether those aftershocks would be detrimental for them or not. Historical context and culture, of course, is explanatory how culture can make you stress in a certain context. For example, your culture is demanding you to marry only within your specific tribe or your specific group. So that would cause you a lot of stress, a lot of pain, sadness, especially if you had fallen in, let's say, fallen in love with someone outside your culture. For example, your culture is also pressuring you to do a lot of things that you do not want to do. Being torn between culture and your family, let's say your family who is enforcing that culture on you, would cause poor mental well-being, especially to a child, if the child is exposed to such peer pressure, or let's say force, during a long period of time. The same goes with social relationships, economic and political systems. Of course, economic and political systems can cause a huge effect on mental health, especially if, in the case of, let's say, elections. I've seen a lot of countries that suffered a decline in mental health because of the result of elections. Let's say, your a huge group is focusing more on, let's say, hoping for the best for the country, but then again the corrupt group or the politician who's unexpectedly not the best for the position won the position. Of course, a lot of the people who understand the consequences of not having a competent leader would be very unhappy, and at the same time somewhat feeling a bit anxious for the future if that happens. So that could also be an example under economic and political systems. And of course, physical health, as I had mentioned in one of my examples previously, your overall physical health and physical well-being can contribute to the constant state of your mind. If you're having an illness in your physical body, of course, it's going to affect how you perceive things. If, for example, in the case, I have a grandmother who's been suffering from multiple illnesses, especially illnesses associated with her bones. She had scoliosis, osteoporosis. If you know this common but somewhat very painful illnesses for the old or the elderly, um, due to these accumulated illnesses, of course, it's going to affect your mood. It's going to affect, you're going to get grumpy, you're going to get prone to anger and pain because you're suffering from pain. Who doesn't? Yeah, of course, you're going to have less control of your emotions if you're suffering constantly every day. So that's given. That's an example under physical health. Of course, going back to the workplace, here are what we want for our workers and, of course, for ourselves. Number one is we need to feel good. So we're always, as humans, we always want positive feelings and life satisfaction. It's actually one of the goals of our lives, right? We always want the best for ourselves and our family. So it's essential that we feel good. Next is function well. Of course, whether it's in the workplace or as an individual, we need to function well. We want that, we who would want not being able to do anything for, let's say, 1 week. Of course, it's going to be good to be able to take a rest for a day, let's say not do anything for a day. But if it's going to not be doing anything at all for, let's say, a long period of time or a month, it's going to somewhat affect us internally, and of course how we perceive things as an individual, as a professional, because we're not functioning well as a person. So of course we need to do things to provide meaning and purpose. Of course, each of us has our own individual meaning and life purpose. We do a lot of our things that we do daily. We sacrifice a lot of the things we do for different people, for different, let's say, goals and perspectives. So again, we need to be connected. No matter how introvert a person is, he would always want to be connected on some level with someone. For example, I had a friend who's an introvert, a very extremely introverted person. However, despite her introvertedness, she still sought to find someone who is a friend, who's always there for her, who's going to support her despite being introverted. And um, guess what? She found her person who is also an introvert, but much more sociable compared to her. So the two of them always go hand in hand, and I think that's proof enough that, just because you're introvert doesn't mean that you want to be completely isolated from the world. Of course, you would need someone to be connected to. You need as a human, we need that certain sense of belonging and feeling of being valued. It's one of our love languages as a given. It's that sense of belonging that gives us the feeling of love, the feeling of being loved, and of course, it gives us motivation to life as well. So here are the statistics. These are just example of statistics, particularly in New Zealand, wherein mental health problems cost businesses for at least $1.65 billion per annum. Of course, it's going to cost, a lot. It's somewhat subtle. It's often overseen. It's often not observed well. Um, it's not actually obvious. How these mental health problems could cost a company or an organization whole bunch of money. In what aspect? For example, a company suddenly loses let's say three employees who are veterans, who are old employees already. They know the job, they know everything, they function perfectly. But for some reason the company lost those three employees because of mental health problems, both because of work and of because of, let's say, family problems. They would need to replace those people. So of course they would need to change the promotions, they would promote a lot of the employees, they would need to hire new employees to make up for the lost workforce. And that hiring would take, let's say, different costs on training, different costs on hiring, different costs on, let's say, benchmarking. They would need to find, let's say, potential. Maybe they would need to contact different workforce recruitment agencies. So those costs can accumulate to a large amount of money if a certain company does not focus on improving the mental health, wellness, and mental well-being of their workforce. So that's an example under the first statistics. So a lot of respondents, as they said, on a certain research program conducted last 2019, 20% of the respondents experienced depression, anxiety, 31%, and 60% stress. So these are very common. Even during our training I attended, rather a conference I attended with the Danish Trade Union, we have discussed a lot of ILO, let's say, conventions and different policies, provisions regarding this. How occupational health and safety involve mental health well-being as well, and how little effort is being given by whether employers, companies, organizations, or institutions have been focusing less on improving the mental health of the workforce. Nowadays we focus more on raising the standards rather than raising the mental health or overall well-being of the workforce. We often, it's like upgrading a car without upgrading the engine. So it's somewhat alarming, at the same time toxic in a sense, because we do not focus on the people, but we focus first on the job rather than the person doing the job. Here in this picture, you can see here that the New Zealand conducted different researches, and these are the results on why they are unhappy with their health, or what's happening with their health, mental well-being. So a lot of the Kiwis, as they've said, are waiting more than 2 days to seek medical treatment. Many of them are not getting enough sleep and are not prioritizing it. They indicate that they have been stressed in the last month, less likely to keep their brain stimulated. They do not get enough exercise and are not considering it. If you have weak mental health, or rather poor mental health, of course, you would not have the energy to get exercise, or you would not even consider to get exercise, because you do not even have the bare minimum energy to conduct your daily routine. If you do not have the energy to conduct the necessary tasks, why would you conduct the tasks that are not, you do not see as necessary? Because it's not required of you. you know it's just something that can improve your health, but because your health is already taking a toll, why would you enough exert more effort? So that's sometimes the mentality of people who are suffering from poor mental well-being. Of course, they also experience poor work-life balance, as I mentioned, how mental health can drastically or detrimentally affect the overall life balance of a person. And of course, they have less likely to spend time outdoors. We humans, a lot of the humans, or rather the population nowadays, would either use coping mechanisms wherein they shop, they go out. However, if you are also suffering from financial problems, which could have been the cause of your poor mental well-being, of course, you would just need to stick in your house. So, especially during the pandemic, a lot of people have been stagnant with their lifestyle. A lot of them maybe developed the love for the indoors. So, there's a lot of people who barely get out. I know someone. Uh, she's actually my best friend. She's an entrepreneur. She's the daughter of one of the glass companies in our locality. So she quit her 9 to 5 job in the government because of a toxic environment. A lot of her peers were bullying her despite because of having a humble lifestyle despite having rich family, a rich family. So because of this reason, she she started working indoors. She's been managing a resort, but she rarely goes out. There was one time that she didn't come out for a whole week from her room. So I was like, how were you able to do that? I could stay in the room for a whole day, but not a whole week. She said maybe it's because of the lifestyle, maybe it's because of her well-being, that she's not really much having the energy or having the let's say interest to go outside to see the outside world. So there's more likely also to consider nurturing and maintaining relationships, but are not doing this already. So there's also, as I mentioned, my Canadian friend. I would have I advise him actually when he was suffering from his mental health problem. He has been I told him, have you contacted your did you make any contact at all with your parents, even with just a phone call? Because I think his parents are far away. He's staying at the dorm of his university, whereas his parents is at another province. So I asked him, like, if you're having a hard time with your work and with your school, how or why are you not making any contact with your family? I know him that he's not the type who's having a bad relationship with his family. His family is very supportive. And he told me he doesn't know why, but he doesn't feel the need to contact his family. I encouraged him, and after the phone call, he said he started feeling well. Maybe it's because you're when you're suffering from a poor well-being, whether it's physical or especially when it's mental, you don't have this what you call this you're in survival mode. Your body is basically, especially your mind, is in survival mode. When you're in survival mode, you would not be able to consider your resources properly. Most of the time, you would need to consume most, or rather the least number of resources you could find is right. If, for example, if you're in a stranded island, of course you would minimize the use of your resources. It's the same with your mind. If you're in survival mode, you're functioning at low levels of energy, you're functioning at low levels of interest. You would want to always function with the least amount of resources. You would just want to eat food, you would just want to sleep the necessary amount of sleep. Sometimes you don't even consider um, getting, or yeah, you're not prioritizing enough sleep. So you're functioning at the bare minimum, rather not the bare minimum, the minimum levels that you could function well. And it's going to take a toll on your body because it's not helping your health at all. It's going to actually make it worse. So those are some of the things that's happening, some of the usual problems that our young professionals, our youth, or other, actually anybody in the current 21st century society is rather suffering from, because of the race standards and a lot of other factors that can contribute to this health. So emotional well-being worries. So here are actually just some. If you can look on the screen, there's about not having money. Of course, not having enough money to support yourself and your family is practically the biggest concern of anybody in the world. So there's a lot of concerns about money, children's resilience, and other global issues that could affect our mental well-being. So the business case and the business aims. Of course, when it comes to any form of industry, these are the following goals. So if you're going to improve your the mental health or mental well-being of your workforce, of course you would have improved recruitment and retention, because your workforce will not go from job to job. Your employees will not try to find greener pastures wherein they are more happy, or they're happier with their jobs, with themselves. So if you provide good compensation, you provide a welcoming and non-toxic environment, you would have better retention of employees. You won't need to have um, your employees transferring jobs, and of course, better recruitment, because um, let's say the reputation of your company would improve because there's a lot of older employees there who can testify on how much you take care of your employees. So of course, a lot of the young professionals who don't have any idea in the world would be tempted to try your company and grow within your company because of the reviews, or I call it reviews, the product reviews by your older employees. Of course, there will be fewer disruptions impacting your organizations, because let's say um, your employees have better health, have better mental well-being, so there will be less arguments, there will be less fights. Your employees will not be suffering from mood swings that could affect how they perform during their tasks, or whether they are with, let's say, functioning tasks in groups, or in, let's say, in partners. And there, of course, there will be enhanced reputation. As I mentioned, the reputation would improve for your industry, your company, or your organization, because of how you take care of your employees. Next is, of course, decrease unplanned leave. Okay, so a lot of people nowadays are, I think here in the Philippines, it's already been trying to be proposed, wherein there would be a leave specifically for improving mental health. There's a lot of people who would take sudden leaves. They would call it a sick leave because they're suffering from mental health. There are a lot of people who are, let's say, they woke up not feeling well. They have low well-being, low, rather poor mental well-being. They would just not really feel the need to go to work. They would just apply for sick leave, a sudden unplanned leave. So as a boss, as an employer, if for example you have an important task to do on that day, and that would concern that employee, if that employee suddenly decides to take an unplanned leave, it would be trouble for you and your company. And of course, decrease presenteeism, increase productivity, and improve customer service. Of course, a happy employee is also a happy client, because there's a lot of um, employees nowadays who, once they have an improved mental well-being, when they feel happy with their work, of course it's going to resonate with their aura. It's going to resonate with how they talk or how they communicate with their clients, and of course your customers or your clients would feel better, well, or rather well received, if your employees are smiling, if your employees are happy. So that's also improved customer service. Of course, knowledge, skills, and experience are of little use without energy, because they wouldn't be functioning well. So here are just actually some of the different provisions under this. So Human Rights Act 1993, etc. You can use it as reference for all of these, um, how should I say it, all of these advantages of improving the mental health of your workforce. So how do you actually create positive environments? Originally, in the PowerPoint of Working Well of the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand, this was supposedly creating positive work environments. Why did I remove the word work? Because as a person, you need to develop positive environments both at work and at home. Because as I mentioned, it goes hand in hand. Your professional self and your individual self or personal self goes hand in hand. If something goes wrong at your house, there's a high chance that how it's going to affect how you function at work overall. So how do you create positive environments? First, you need to be safe. Security is always, or rather, the top priority on the list. Why? It's a basic necessity. If you look back on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you remember the, if you know the triangle of Maslow's hierarchy needs, security is basically included in the lower levels because it's one of the top priorities of, or rather, the basic needs of a person. You need to be psychologically healthy in the environment. You need to feel psychologically secure in your workplace, in your home, in your room. If you do not feel happy, if you do not feel secure, protected, or you overall you don't find comfort in your work or in your, let's say, in your workplace or in your home, you're not going to find a place of peace. And it's an important or a critical factor for every person to have this certain space for peace or for their mental well-being whenever they need to, just be calm and detach from all of the different factors that can affect their well-being. Next is, of course, you need support. You need supportive circles. You need to have your supportive friends at work. You need to have supportive peers, colleagues. You need to have your supportive family. So even if, let's say, for example, you have not very good relationships with your family members, you need to find a certain circle, the closest social circle that you can find. Let's say a group of best friends, or let's just say a best friend who you can confide with everything that you're experiencing every day. Not actually every day, but let's just say you're confined with that. You confide with them every now and then. Let's say every week. That's already a good start with having a supportive circle. Let's say at work, even though you're having a toxic environment, there will always be at least one, there's always at least one employee there that's still going to be healthy for you. So why not try to be friends with that person? At least you need to have this certain support circle, this support person within your vicinity that you can always have access to or be in certain connection with whenever you're suffering or having trouble with your, let's say, your overall well-being, whether it's physical or mental health. Next is, of course, you need to be strong. It's some You need to have a certain circle or a certain environment wherein they would push you to fulfill your potential. Let's say they would boost your mental well-being and resilience. A healthy environment. You need in the workplace, for example, you would need to have an environment that would nourish your body. Let's say you have proper ventilation, you have let's say proper lighting, you have proper access to clean water. That would fall under the strong category. So those are actually the just three factors that can affect creating positive environments. But here are the key elements for creating positive environments at home and at work. So leadership and culture is always factors there because leadership and culture contributes to proper performance. So number one is leadership commitment. The second is policies and processes. The third is effective communication, and the last is evaluating or reviewing. Focusing on leadership and commitment. This happens whether at work and at home. At work, leadership commitment would focus on more on your human resource or your administration, your boss, with how they improve or how they make effort to improve the mental well-being of the workforce. In the case of your home, the leadership commitment would fall under you because your mental well-being is your responsibility. It's your it's something that would come with your actions, with your choices, with your decisions. So of course, you first need to communicate policies and objectives. Be clear with your objectives or policies at your workplace. In the case of the home, it's always your objectives for yourself. What are your goals? What are your dreams? What are you aiming for? Of course, model mentally and healthy behaviors and values. The same goes whether at work at home. When it's at work, of course, always be a model for a good let's say supportive person in a mentally challenging environment. You always need to model that. You need to be mentally healthy. You have mentally and healthy behavior as a person, or as a professional, as a individual. Of course, you need to engage with the team. The team would either be your family at home or your peers or colleagues at work. So you need to always have constant engagement with them. This is your commitment as a leader both in your workplace and at yourself at home. So, next is policies and processes. Policies and processes should support people to work and should be reviewed on a regular basis to ensure they are fit for purpose. So, this would fall under the policies and processes of your human resource or administration. Every institution has this certain manual with how they operate the institution or the industry. For example, in our case, in the Department of Education, our human resource nowadays are actually conducting what they call Prime HR. It's an initiative to improve the performance of our human resource and administration in providing better customer quality, or rather better quality customer service, and at the same time public service overall in the case of our non-teaching personnel and teaching personnel. So in the sense, one of the topics there included improving the mental health of our workers, wherein we put in initiatives such as having team building, workshops, activities, and the like, in order to improve engagement and at the same time develop a positive work environment in the workplace. We also have recently a project called Happy Project. It's a happy school and happy office project, if I remember correctly. It's going actually to be implemented during this coming second week of March. Um, it's basically having different activities depending on what project proposals we would get, but overall, it's the umbrella project on the different activities, programs, and projects that can be implemented to improve a happy environment, whether at school or at work, since we're the Department of Education. So that's one thing. So whenever you're going to look into or review the policies and processes at your workplace, always look in how does each policy impact well-being. So is it safe? Ask questions such as whether it is supportive, whether it will strengthen well-being and the like. So these are just some of the questions that you can use to evaluate or reevaluate the policies and processes at work. The same goes with yourself at home. For example, your family is not is suffering from, let's say, a poor mental well-being. Your sisters, your brothers, they're not getting well. You see that the relationships that you have within your family is not good. You can always reevaluate the routines, or rather the culture in your family. What are the routines that you do every day? Do you talk with your family constantly? Do you chat with them? Do you ask if how their day went, or what are they having constant worries with? Or for example, if you have elderly at home, have you visited them, or have you asked them if they are okay, if they have anything that they need? So those are just some of the policies and processes at home, which you could review as an individual aiming for better well-being. Next is, of course, there's a lot of tools, new tools that the design of mentally healthy work, wherein you can find it in the following links. You can just take a screenshot of the slide. These are provided, of course, by the Mental Health Foundation of New Zealand, wherein there's a lot of CEO's Guide to Mental Health and Wellbeing, vaccination policy support, and of course, the ISO 45003, which is the Occupational Health and Safety Management, or the OSH, focusing on psychological health and safety for psychological risk. Of course, the next one we have effective communication. So always communication is an essential factor in every form of developing relationship and well-being in any place. You need to ensure messages are relevant, transparent, and clear and consistent. You need to have you need to deliver effective, kind, and well-mannered messages communication if you want to improve the well-being of the other person and yourself. So messages should strike a balance, cut through the noise. So there are different types of ways of communication: team discussions, one-on-one discussions, and conversations when someone is struggling. So this can happen whether at home or at work. So let's focus on, for example, team discussions at work. As seen in the picture, is discussing basically with your colleague, asking your colleagues what kind of why are you satisfied with your work, what kind of things have you observed at work that would risk the psychosocial, let's say the mental well-being of our peers. You can ask them, um, how is your 9 to 5 work taking a toll on your body? Is it making you unhappy? Is it making you anxious? Or do you feel safe or secure with our work? You can ask those questions during team discussions or chit chats, break times with your colleagues. In at home, team discussions will fall under family. Let's say at the end of the day, you have family gatherings wherein you ask one another how their day went, how you can improve their day, or you can even have date nights with your family members to improve your mental health overall at the end of the day, so that it wouldn't affect your mental well-being on the upcoming day. So that would fall under team discussions. For teams, of course, you need to know your team members first, your strengths and weaknesses. If you do not know your team members, then you can try with the first step of understanding them. Let them talk, listen, and then try to understand their circumstances. If you keep on trying to be narrow-minded, or like if you keep on being selfish, thinking that, oh, I'm suffering more than them, in a worse mental position, or rather I'm a worse mental composition, or let's just say I'm not in a better um state than them, I have it worse with my life, like that. If you maintain that kind of mentality, that's not going to improve the well-being of your colleague and yourself as well, because you're trying to compare the two. But if you try to just be quiet, just listen properly, try to be an empath, and like um, sympathize with them, that would overall give your team members the idea that you're very much interested with them and you would like to connect with them. That would improve your well-being as a group. And if you're working in a hybrid or work from home situation, always have a routine to check in and debrief. If I remember correctly, during the 2020 pandemic, there's a lot of team members, team leaders who would constantly check on their team members during Zoom calls, during Google Meets. They would contact one another, check in the how much of the tasks have been finished, and at the same time check in whether their team member is suffering from any illness or are okay during the pandemic. So just because the pandemic is finished, or is already at the last stages of being wiped out completely in the world, that doesn't mean that you won't have to check in your colleagues as well. Of course, you need to always check in your colleagues, whether in your the work from home, or let's say in office. Like for example, in our department, we would always constantly check on one another. How have you been? Are you okay? Or what's up? What's happening with you? Are you okay? Do you feel a little bit down on the side today? What's happening? Are you okay? Something, just constant greetings like that is very, very helpful. The same goes if you're at distance with your family. A phone call is just a phone, everything is just in the tip of our fingers nowadays. Just one click on your desk in your laptop, one click on your phone, you can already check in on someone. You can already tap into someone. You can already make a call. So why not exert that minimum effort just to check on someone? You never know. Maybe that act of checking on someone, maybe that your single hello, are you okay, maybe that single question is already a saving grace for the other person. Also, make well-being conversations a part of the normal check-in process. Ensure expectations of the team. Okay, always be clear with what you want, and always create a sense of control, hope, and fun, and team building within the group or community. In the case of one-on-one, so this happens. This is actually a more um, challenging challenging way, because there are some people who feel intimidated by one-on-one discussions. But if you create the right environment, the right personality, the right approach to the person, they would be able to feel your sincerity, and then at the same time welcome your initiative to be open with them. So in this case, one-on-one conversations, you need to practice everyday conversations. How are you today? What's important to you today? What supports are in place? What barriers? You need to ask how they are doing overall as an individual and as a professional at work or at home. So if you become a great at having everyday conversations, then when someone is struggling, it's going to be easier to talk about it. So if you've been in Tinder, if you've been in different dating apps or dating profiles or even just bio profiles on social media, you would see some people saying, "Oh, I don't like small talk." But the problem is small talk is always and often, the beginning of larger talk or deeper talks. I don't understand why people would say, I don't I hate small talk. Big things often come or often begin in small steps. So if you do not conduct small talks or everyday conversations, you would not be able to talk about deeper problems. Like, let's say, if someone is struggling, let's say you have a colleague who's struggling, are you going to just go to them and ask them, are your family members fighting, are your family members some doing something like this, or are you suffering from depression or something like that? Of course not. That's not that's actually a rude way or somewhat strange way of striking a conversation. Of course you would need to begin with light topics, then gradually going deeper as you get to know the person. That's the art of conversation. And then we have the LDR, or the COVID-19 conversation. LDR is long distance relationship. So this happens, I call it the LDR, or the COVID-19 conversation, because this took the trend way back 2020, especially during LDR situationships, wherein you would use this type of conversation online because you're doing it on the phone or you're doing it on your desktop or your laptop. So here are just tips, some of the tips when you're having those online conversations with a person. So you need to be aware and manage your emotions. A lot of people are perceptive of tone, speed, and body language. When there are some people who are naturally loud speaking, or they have a large, or rather a high tone or a bigger tone of voice, and that can sometimes be misinterpreted by the other person. They would think you're angry, but you're not. Actually, it's just a normal way of speaking. So you need to manage your tone, your speed, and a lot of the little things that can contribute to misunderstandings. Of course, next is being non-judgmental. If you're on the receiving end, you need to be open. You need to understand that maybe that person is not actually meaning something bad. That person is may not be angry, maybe it's just on the tone of voice. You need to also try to understand the other person at the other end, because not all people can manage their body language and their vocal language well. So you also need to ask questions. You do not need to make assumptions. Listen and try to understand, empathize, use affirmations, and the like. So those are just the tips. So when you're conversing with someone who's struggling, so you can ask, what might you notice? There's a lot of change in behavior, emotions, thoughts, and reactions. But what can you do if someone is struggling? So you need to ask, listen, help, and repeat. You just ask them, are you okay? If they decide to open up, then listen. If they do not open up, then try again in the next day. If it's not again, you can always try and try until that person gradually opens up. But if that person really decides not to open up, don't push the boundaries, because there's a lot of people who take a long time and take a long effort to open their doors to someone. Then, of course, after you listen, you need to help and, of course, repeat the process. So, how could you start a conversation? Here are just some tips. Consider the conversation's time and place. Always consider the context. Talk about the behavior or change. Reassure them and be non judgmental. Always have a welcoming behavior and welcoming environment with you. Again, ask questions and don't make assumptions. Empathize. Help them make a plan. You don't need to be forcing them to do things that they do not want. You just need to suggest to them the things that could help them, and let them choose between those options. Again, check back in later. Of course, you would always need to check back on the person. The last would be evaluating and reviewing. So we have KISS, consider the conversation, evaluate the conversation, review the conversation, and evaluate the conversation. So, KISS, consider the conversation,
Hello, ma'am.
Oh, hello. I cut off.
Ma'am, is your presentation is finished?
In which part of the presentation was it cut? Oh, okay.
You can,
So wait. Let me present again.
ma'am, ma'am, you can continue your presentation.
On which part was it?
Sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I added to screen.
Is it on this slide wherein it was cut off?
Ma'am, we can't see you. Your camera is turned off.
Oh, wait. Hi. So I apologize for the interruption. I think yes, I was cut off from the internet. I was not aware. So yes, maybe I could just discuss the last part already.
Okay, ma'am, you carry on. I added your slides.
Okay, so thank you. Um, I'm not sure where I was cut off, but maybe it is on this slide, the last part, because this is where I was notified. Um, in this case, okay, like continuing on the last part, of course, in every organization, you would need to evaluate and review your policies and how you address your, let's say, how you address mental health on your workplace. Here's an abbreviation. It's called KISS, Keep It Simple, Sweetie. Of course, you would need first to ask, revisit, and then continually improve. So in this case, um, you always need to ask stuff first. You can do this whether you're an employee or an employer. You can conduct one-on-ones with your colleagues. You can always conduct team meetings and ask them overall of their what's happening for them. It's always better to check in with one another. Then, of course, you need to revisit plans regularly. It doesn't mean that you have already existing plans or existing plans, existing policies or processes that is focused on improving mental health. That would already make do. It's still different, You always need to first revisit, review, evaluate, and then revise those existing plans to match with the current changing times or changing standards or changing, let's say, changing statistics. Maybe your workforce had been suddenly taking a toll on their mental health. Then you would always need to revise your current plans, your current actions, addressing, let's say, this sudden change. And of course, it's always about starting and continually improving. Change is often achieved with continuous improvement, continuous actions. If you are not consistent with this kind of mentality, this kind of change, this kind of, let's say, continual improvement, continual development, change is not likely going to be in the horizon for you if you don't do this. So, first, you need to understand what your workplace or your group could offer. So, here are just some tips, which is, for example, add in your local supports and services. Let's say in our department, there's always this certain hotline that the yeah, certain hotline wherein employees could call it whenever they're having mental health problems. We call it the mental health hotline. So it would fall under employee assistance programs. For example, your company or your workplace may be offering certain assistance programs for those who are suffering from mental health. Maybe your company has what they call grievance committees, wherein your employees or your employees could always raise concerns whenever they are having problems with the administration, where they're having problems with, let's say, their colleagues. You need to also have key staff contacts, your staff members that they can always contact whenever there's a problem. Of course, local health and well-being providers. You always need to orient your employees with what resources they could reach into. For example, if there is a local hotlines for or local numbers, local contacts, wherein your employees can contact the local hospital, the local, let's say, local emergency line. Whenever there's having, for example, some of your employees could be suicidal, they could always contact that. So you always need to provide and post those numbers in the different parts of your workplace. Next is, of course, conduct benchmarking on HR best practices. There's nothing wrong with asking help from different institutions. You can always ask them for, let's say, best practices or other practices they're having on management and personal support, because you can always adapt that practice and enforce it in your own institution. And of course, there's always reading books, watching documentaries, observing people, and listening to podcasts, because you can learn a lot from them. For example, it's already being a trend nowadays wherein a lot of young professionals are focusing on personal development through reading books, reading podcasts, rather listening to podcasts and the like, because knowledge is there. You just need to apply those knowledge and make do and change your routine for yourself to improve your well-being. So here are just some of the last links I could provide. Thankful for Mental Health Foundation for this PowerPoint, but these are just some of the different links that you could go into and get a lot of the different resources, different guides that could help improve your mental well-being. At the same time, you can share this with all of your friends and all your colleagues. So I guess that ends the presentation now. Let me leave you with the quote: what we achieve inwardly will change outer reality. um, it basically means what's happening inside you will have a general effect on the reality that is before you. So again, thank you for listening. Again, this is Ms. Cheryl Grace B. Pascal from the Philippines. I hope you learned a lot from today's session.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your rich content presentation. I hope after your presentation, our knowledge seeker can learn something new, which was our only intention. Learn and grow together, IGP knowledge seeker. Once again, thank you so much, ma'am, for your presentation. Now, ma'am, it's time for our question answer session, which is the one more valuable part of our regular webinar on ma'am. Please stay with us. After a short video, we will back with our session part 2, which is the question answer part. Dear IGP knowledge seeker, please ask your question in the comment box as much as you want to know from our speaker. Thank you. After webinar certification, we have an online quiz competition and quiz certification. Dear IGP knowledge seeker, please ask your question in the comment box as much as you want to know from our speaker. Thank you. After question answer, we have an webinar certification. After webinar certification, we have an online quiz competition and quiz certification. when a mental illness is acute. Thank you.
Sorry. Sorry, I think my mic was muted. So, okay, so thank you for the question, Sir Salviejo. Regarding to the effects of poor mental well-being, there's a lot of effects, as I've mentioned in the previous slides, in the presentation, wherein it could affect gradually, for example, the your physical health as well, especially if you're having, as I mentioned, the mental well-being of a person is very directly correlated with their, or rather, directly correlated or affected by their physical health as well, and vice versa. So if you're having let's say anxiety, it's going to manifest with your physical health. There's a lot of people who are suffering from different mental health problems or poor well-being, such as, let's say, anxiety, depression, and the like, who are um, being manifested physically, wherein they would have a lot of scratches on them. They would have different mannerisms. Some of them would even have poor sleep, or they would have insomnia, and a lot of them would have low levels of interest, and at the same time low levels of energy when it comes to doing their daily tasks. So when a mental illness or mental health problem, or rather to say just a poor mental well-being overall, is considered chronic or acute, it would mean that there's a significant effects of the poor mental well-being that's affecting their certain lives. For example, you're experiencing anxiety or depression for a long period of time. That's already considered as chronic or acute. So I hope that that answers your question, Sir Salvejo. I guess we have a next question here from Ma'am Hannah
Thank you so
Acoto.
much, ma'am, for your answer. Our next question is from Hannah. How to help someone physically and social suffering from depression who refuse medical help and or social help?
Okay, so thank you, Miss Hannah, for this. There's actually, this is one of the most challenging, especially if you're dealing with a very antisocial person. Of course, yes, suffering from depression, or let's just say social anxiety, or maybe social psychosis or something like that, that prevents them from reaching help, especially from different people, because of their already their state of well-being. So in this case, I think it's very much helpful to tap into their inner circle first. Because no matter how antisocial the person is, of course, they would have this direct support group. They would have their, let's just say, their parents, who, or at least a friend that they are still closely related to or closely connected at the very least. In the worst case scenarios of those who isolate themselves completely, it would need medical help or let's say professional help overall already, because it would take a lot of different strategies of convincing. Because I've been with actually a person who's been like that. She was suffering from uh, depression, and at the same time antisocial problems as well, because she's always been an introvert, and it was hard convincing her to get medical help or social help at the very least. So I just asked her mother, because she was at least very close with her mother, to try and help me convince the girl into having, or at least getting, the minimum medical help that she would need. And gradually from there, the moment she tries to open up for the very least, you can gradually take little steps little steps into improving the help that she would be receiving. So I hope that answers, Ma'am Hannah, your question. Here's another question from Sir Aaron Salvejo. Miss, I think there's another question.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your answer. Ma'am, our next question is from Aaron. Good afternoon, ma'am. What a simple way to maintain positive mental health and well-being.
So thank you, Sir Aaron. In this case, for example, you're not really actually suffering from really poor mental well-being. You just want to maintain your positive mental health. Of course, some of the tips would be doing. For me, I think it's doing the things you love. Always integrating little hobbies in your routine, because as I've mentioned recently, the current trends in society, in the workplace, in the career or the work side hustles, they are focusing more on how to perform better and push ourselves past our own capabilities. So I think a lot of the workforce nowadays are actually having or suffering from these dull routines. Weekly, they would just sleep, go to work, eat, and then sleep again. So I think reviving your hobbies. For example, you have hobbies way back in college. Like for me, I had hobbies with arts. I was very much I really enjoy reading, I really enjoy singing, I really enjoy um, making sketches, painting. I think reviving those old hobbies could revitalize your routine and maintain or at least improve your mental health and well-being. You can also try meditation. For example, when you wake up in the morning, before rushing into the bathroom to take your shower in order to get to work, why not take a few minutes first of breathing exercises, basically just being calm in the dark, in order to mentally prepare yourself and of course emotionally prepare yourself as well for the day ahead. Sometimes for me, I would even go outside of the house at around, let's say, 5 in the morning, take short walks, and at the same time, sometimes I would even visit my garden. I always maintain a personal garden for myself, even in the urban city. I have these small pots wherein I would plant little plants there, little, let's say I have onion chives, different. I enjoy gardening overall. So I just put these little plants to take care of, because I feel like I get refreshed, I feel revitalized whenever I see them. So every morning before I go to work, I would visit them, try to pull out some of the weeds, a little bit of the weeds, water them, and just breathe in the energy and, of course, the oxygen that is being in. The morning dew is very much revitalizing and refreshing. So I always do those small routines and by integrating them in my routines. And at the same time, there are times when I feel down. I do not recommend over stressing, but over eating as a stress coping mechanism. But it actually helps, when you're feeling upset or something, you can eat something that you like. For me, one of my comfort foods would be my the soup that my mother used to make me to yeah, she used to make me whenever I feel unhappy or I feel quite down, I feel sick. I usually do or cook that soup whenever I feel upset. And of course, I drink it. And after that, it improves my overall well-being. So those are the little things that you could do. You can take walks before or after work. You can go out with your friends. You can talk casually with your friends when you need it to. Just the little things that can make you happy would always, in the long run, help you maintain positive mental health in a challenging environment. I hope that answers your question, Sir Aaron.
Ma'am, we covered all the questions from our participants. Once again, thank you so much, IGP. We have learned a lot from you with new topics. It will add some value to our day-to-day activity along with our academic and professional growth. Honorable ma'am, hope to see you again with a new topic and a new day. Thank you, ma'am. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope you have a great day.
Honorable ma'am, before we move to the next webinar certification process, if you want to leave this studio, you can, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Julie noted. See you, everyone.
Welcome, ma'am. I'll RGP knowledge seeker, it's time for the webinar certification. This is the most attractive and powerful part of our regular webinar. After a short video, we will start our webinar certification. After webinar certification, we have an online quiz competition and quiz certification. IGP knowledge seeker, it's time for the webinar certification. This is the most attractive and powerful part of our regular webinar. After a short video, we will start our webinar certification. After webinar certification, we have an online quiz competition and online quiz certification. We are IGP knowledge seeker. For some technical issue, we cannot provide our webinar certificate processing code today. We will give all the code in our official Facebook page and Facebook group as soon as possible. We are IGP knowledge seeker. It's time for the most engaging part of our regular webinar, which is an online quiz competition, which is our regular webinar activity. Now, time for the online quiz competition. To join the online quiz competition properly, please follow my instruction carefully. Now, time for the online quiz competition. To join the online quiz competition properly, please follow my instruction carefully. Go to www.slido.com, find today's quiz code or scan this QR code for direct joining. The quiz code is Global IGP. After a short video, we will start matching your friend to join our quiz session. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. Please join in Slido with the code and the code is global IGP. With 25 people, we are going to start our first session right now. Our first question is who was primary responsibility for healthcare service, e.g., hospital and mental health facilities? Option 1 state government, option 2 local government. Option 1 state government is right answer. 67% people are right here. In the leaderboard, Emily is holding the first position. Our second question is the process for validating the qualifications of licensed professions is called option 1 registering, option 2 credentialing. Option 2 credentialing is the right answer. 80% people are right here. In the leaderboard, Charlene is holding the first position. Our third question is tertiary healthcare, option 1 specialist and often complex are option 2 is providing in the community by local authorities. Option 1 is specialist and often complex care is right answer. 76% people are right here. In the leaderboard, Imla is holding the first position. Our fourth question is when a person is taking medication for a mental illness, they have option 1 to access effective treatment and be given all relevant information after 2 to always refuse the medication. Option 1 to access effective treatment and be again all relevant information is the right answer. 100% people are right here. The leaderboard, Imla is holding the first position. Our fifth question is true or false, the care certificate is mandatory for all healthcare workers. Option 1 true, option 2 false. Option 2 false, the right answer. 23% people are right here. In the leaderboard, Misal is holding the first position. Our sixth question is as many as 2 or 3 of people with serious malpractice have experienced homelessness or been at risk for homelessness. Option 1 false, option 2 true. কুইজগুলো করো সবগুলো আজকে সব শেষ কালকে সবারটা করতে নেই আমারও তো নেই করে Option 2 true is the right answer. 77% people are right here. In the leaderboard, Misal is holding the first position. Our second question is which of the following is not offered by non-government organization for mental illness? Option 1 due to mental illness. Option 2 day 2 day residential programs. Option 2, due to mental illness, right answer 23% people are right here. In the leaderboard, Charlene is holding the first position. Our eighth question is this again of the dash has serious implication for our society expected to surely impact healthcare. Option 1, middle age chart. Option 2, baby boom chart. Option 2, baby boom chart is right answer. 40% people are right here. In the leaderboard, Michelle is holding the first position. Our ninth question is which type of healthcare is unavailable for Indian health service patient? Option 1, mental health. Option 2, reproductive. Option 2, reproductive is right answer. 54%, 54% people are right here. In the leaderboard, Michelle is holding the first position. Our last and final question of the morning session is internet-based inventions have potential to enhance mental health service, for example, by supporting self. Option 1 true, option 2 false. Option 1 true is the right answer. 92% people are right here. Congratulations to our online quiz competition winner, top 10. Congratulations again. Slide will take a few minutes for finalizing the result, and after that, we will issue our online quiz competence certificate on our official Facebook page and group, Institute of Global Professionals. Congratulations to our online quiz competition winner, top 10. Congratulations again. Slide will take a few minutes for finalizing the result, and after that, we will issue our online quiz competence certificate on our official Facebook page and group, Institute of Global Professionals. Congratulations to our online quiz competition winner, top 10. Congratulations again. Slide will take a few minutes for finalizing the result, and after that, we will issue our online quiz competence certificate on our official Facebook page and group, Institute of Global Professionals. At the end of moment of our session, we can say profile never stop learning cause life never stop teaching us. Be happy and stay safe. See you again and again. We want your participation in every program. If you want to live a happy life, tie it to a goal, not to people or things. Albert Einstein. Before I say or hit the end light button, again wants to thank all IGP knowledge seekers for your active participation as always. See you again in the next session. Thank you.